My name is Elaine. I'm 41 years old, and I've been married to Tom for 7 years. I used to think we had the kind of relationship that people envied: stable, supportive, kind. There was a time when I felt completely seen in his arms. But now, I feel like I'm talking through a window, tapping the glass, and he's on the other side pretending not to notice. This isn't easy to admit. Not out loud. Not even in my own head. But something happened a few weeks ago, and I can't shake it. I've been playing it over and over again in my mind like some awful movie on a loop. The kind that doesn't quite make sense, but makes you feel something anyway. The truth is, it started with something innocent. Harmless, even. My stepson, Jordan, had been helping me stretch out my lower back after I tweaked something doing yoga. But that afternoon? Something changed. In me. In the room. Between us. I didn't want to say that. I didn't want to feel that. But it's the truth, and pretending otherwise hasn't helped me sleep any better at night. Tom and I used to be magnetic. I remember when we first started dating, he'd touch the small of my back when I'd passed by, press his mouth to my neck when I was brushing my teeth. It wasn't always overtly sexual, but it was connected. Intimate. I felt like I was someone he wanted, not just someone he lived with. But over the past year, it's felt like that current between us went static. I'd lean into him on the couch, and he'd pat my leg distractedly, eyes glued to his phone. I'd kiss him before bed, and it was like kissing a man underwater, slow, heavy, distant. Last month, I reached out for him in the dark, just wanting to hold him, to feel something spark again, and he sighed. Not loudly. But it was a sigh that said everything. I remember pulling back and whispering, "Sorry." And he just said, "Long day." Always. Long day. Tired. Stressed. Not now. Maybe tomorrow. We never fought. Not really. That's the trickiest part of all of this. How do you explain the grief of missing someone who still shares your bed every night? It's the silence that hurts. The silence and the subtle cold. The day it shifted, the day Jordan helped me stretch, Tom had already left early for a work trip. I remember watching him grab his suitcase and lean in to kiss my cheek. I turned toward his lips, out of instinct. He missed. Or avoided. I'm not sure which. "Don't forget to ice your back," he said. That was his goodbye. No "I love you." Not even a wave. I stood in the hallway in my robe, chilled in the morning air, watching the door close behind him. That was the moment I knew something had changed. Not in a dramatic, crashing kind of way. But like when you wake up and realize the warmth you felt next to you was just a dream. I didn't know what I was mourning yet. Only that I was. When Jordan came downstairs later that morning, fresh from his run, cheeks red from the cold, I smiled and tried to shake it off. He noticed I was stiff and offered to help. He's always been easygoing, considerate in that effortless 24-year-old way that doesn't feel performative. We sat on the floor together. He gently guided my arm up, braced my lower back with his hand. I didn't feel tense around him. I felt seen. And maybe that's what scared me the most. Because for the first time in a long time, someone touched me like I mattered. Not like a wife who forgot to take the trash out. Not like a body sharing the bed. But a person. It was nothing. But also, it wasn't. And I can't stop thinking about that. Tom used to be a firefighter, and I loved that about him. The calm in chaos, the steady presence, the quick thinking. That kind of confidence drew me in when we first met. But now? I think he still wears that helmet at home, metaphorically, at least. Always on guard. Always trying to fix things, instead of feeling them. It's not that he doesn't try. He does. The night he got back from his trip, He came into the bedroom while I was folding laundry. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by half-sorted piles, trying to convince myself that if I just kept moving, I wouldn't cry. "Hey," he said, stepping over a sock and kneeling behind me. "You still sore?" I nodded, not looking up. Then I felt his hands. Firm, familiar. He pressed his thumbs into my lower back, working upward like he used to when he'd surprise me with back rubs in the kitchen, in bed, in the car after long drives. It used to make me feel cared for. Desired, even. Now, it felt like a task. I flinched, just slightly. But he noticed. He paused. "Too hard?" I hesitated. "No, just. I don't know. I'm tired." He stayed there, silent, then leaned in and kissed the top of my head. "You don't have to do everything, you know. I can help." That should have been the moment I softened. But I didn't. I stayed stiff, hands still gripping a pair of his boxer briefs. Because what I wanted wasn't hands on my back or help folding clothes. I wanted him to ask me how I'd been. What I'd been feeling. If I was okay. If I missed him, and if he missed me. He sat down beside me and grabbed a t-shirt from the pile. "Let's knock this out. Then maybe we can watch something?" Or, he touched my thigh, a familiar signal. I forced a smile and nodded. Later, while he scrolled through Netflix options, I kept thinking about how Jordan had looked at me, really looked. Like I was more than just a fixture in the house. Not someone to be managed or massaged, but someone to talk to. To understand. I hated that I was comparing them. Hated that my mind even went there. But still. The next morning, I found Tom in the kitchen pouring coffee. He was humming. It was a good morning for him, well rested, maybe. He turned when I entered, gave me a peck on the lips. It was dry. Functional. "Your back any better?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Jordan helped me stretch it out while you were gone." He nodded absently, then reached into the fridge for creamer. "That kid's in good shape. Probably knows what he's doing." I stood there for a beat longer than I should have, hoping he might ask more. But he didn't. That afternoon, I drove Jordan to the gym. He'd left his car at the mechanic's, and I offered because it felt easier than sitting in the house pretending to read. On the way there, he glanced at me at a red light. "You okay?" he asked. Just like that. "What do you mean?" I replied too quickly. He shrugged. "You just seem. I don't know. Quieter than usual." I didn't answer, but my throat tightened. We pulled up to the gym, and before he got out, he touched my wrist lightly. "You don't have to pretend around me, you know." I smiled through it. "Thanks." He jogged away, and I sat in the driver's seat for a few minutes longer, watching him disappear through the doors. When I got home, Tom was in the garage fiddling with his tools. I stood at the doorway and watched him, trying to imagine how I used to feel watching him work. Admiring him. Wanting him. But now all I felt was the space between us. When he saw me, he wiped his hands on a rag and grinned. "There you are. Thought you vanished." I almost told him then. Not about Jordan. Not about the moment in the car. But about us. About how I felt like we were roommates with skin. About how much I missed feeling anything. But instead, I said, "Just tired." He came over and kissed my forehead. Still trying. Always trying. But we were speaking two different languages. Tom came up behind me while I was rinsing dishes, sliding his arms around my waist like he used to. It should have felt comforting. Safe. But instead, I stiffened, hands wet and shaking slightly as they hovered under the stream of water. He leaned in and pressed his lips behind my ear. You smell good, he said softly. I forced a laugh, the sound dry in my throat. It's dish soap. He chuckled. Still good. I wanted to relax into him. God, I wanted to melt like I used to when he touched me, back when affection wasn't a precursor to expectation. But now? Now every time he put his hands on me, I felt myself retreat a little further into the quiet place I'd started building inside. His hands drifted lower, fingers brushing the curve of my hips. I braced myself. Let's go upstairs, he whispered. We haven't had time alone in forever. I turned off the tap and wiped my hands slowly on the dish towel, not meeting his eyes. I've got laundry to fold, I said. And I'm behind on emails. Tom pulled back a little, but only just. Babe, come on. I miss you. I turned around then, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes. I'm just not in the mood tonight. Sorry. He nodded, jaw tightening just a little. It's been a lot of nights lately. I swallowed. I know. There was a beat of silence before he added, Is it me? Did I do something? I looked at him, at the face I used to find so easy to love. His forehead creased slightly, not angry, just confused. Maybe a little hurt. No, I said quickly. It's not you. I don't know. It's everything. But even I knew that wasn't completely true. Later, in bed, he reached for my hand. I let him take it. I even curled my fingers around his like muscle memory. But it felt like wearing someone else's clothes. Familiar fabric, wrong fit. He moved closer, kissed my shoulder. His mouth was warm. His breath steady. He wasn't being aggressive. Just loving. Trying. I knew that. And still, my body froze under the sheets. He kissed my neck. My cheek. My lips. And I kissed him back, but I was thinking about grocery lists. About the email I forgot to send. About Jordan, oddly, and how he'd asked me if I was okay with such clean, honest concern. Tom deepened the kiss. His hand slid over my waist. And then I did it again. That tiny recoil. So subtle he might not have noticed, but I did. I noticed everything now. He pulled back just enough to look at me. You sure you're okay? I nodded too fast. Just tired. He rolled away with a sigh that said more than any words could. I stared at the ceiling, my chest tight with guilt. It wasn't that I didn't want him. That was the part that hurt most. I missed wanting him. I missed lying next to him and feeling like his touch meant more than a routine. Like it wasn't just habit or pressure or obligation. I turned on my side, away from him. He didn't follow. Didn't say goodnight. And I didn't either. I closed my eyes and breathed slowly, trying not to cry. My skin still tingled where he'd kissed me. But not with heat. With guilt. With confusion. With absence. My heart whispered a truth I hated, I don't feel like myself when he touches me anymore. And the thought came uninvited, bitter and hollow, why does everything have to turn into sex? We were supposed to have a date night. Tom made reservations at the steakhouse near the lake, the one we used to go to for anniversaries. He even wore the deep blue button-up I once told him made his eyes look impossibly soft. I noticed that. I noticed everything. That was part of the problem. I stood in front of the mirror for 20 minutes, staring at my reflection in a black dress that used to feel sexy. Now it just felt like trying. The kind of trying that comes from a woman trying to feel something again. Anything. At dinner, Tom reached across the table and took my hand. His thumb grazed the edge of my wrist. You look beautiful, he said. I smiled. Thanks. You okay? He added. Why do you keep asking that? I said it sharper than I intended. He blinked. Because you've been off lately. Distant. I'm fine, I muttered, pulling my hand back to fold the napkin on my lap. Just tired. There it was again. That lazy lie. Tired. It had become a blanket I kept throwing over everything I didn't want to explain. We made it through the main course with polite conversation and long silences. I watched couples around us laugh and lean in toward each other. I watched Tom butter his bread slowly, like it required his full concentration. I was thinking, he said suddenly, maybe we could go away for the weekend. Just us. Get a cabin or something. I looked up from my half-eaten salmon. Why? He frowned. What do you mean, why? To reconnect. Be alone together. I felt something sour rise in my throat. We're alone together every night. That hasn't exactly been working. He set his fork down. Elaine, no, I interrupted. You keep trying to fix this with sex or weekends or dinner reservations. But you never ask me how I actually feel. I ask all the time. No, Tom. You ask if I'm okay. That's not the same. His eyes flared with something, frustration? Embarrassment? Then tell me how you feel, Elle. Because I'm standing here reaching for you every way I know how, and it's like you're slipping away and not even bothering to say why. I stared at him, my chest tightening. Something inside me cracked. I don't know who I am around you anymore, I whispered. I feel like I'm performing. Like I'm playing this role of the wife who's just fine. Who wants what you want, who reacts how she's supposed to. But I don't. I can't. I'm so disconnected from myself I don't even know what I feel until it's too late. The table between us went still. He looked stunned. Hurt. And then I feel guilty, I continued, my voice rising. Because you're not cruel. You're not unfaithful. You're not unkind. You're just not present. Not emotionally. You touch me and I recoil, Tom. Not because I don't love you, but because I feel like I'm being touched by a stranger who remembers what I liked 3 years ago. People were watching us now. I saw a woman at the next table glance sideways, then look down at her wine. Tom leaned back in his chair, arms folded tight across his chest. Is this about Jordan? My stomach dropped. What? You mentioned he helped you stretch. And ever since, you've been different. I blinked. You think are you serious? He didn't answer. Just looked at me like he didn't recognize me. I stood up too fast, grabbing my purse, nearly knocking my chair over. I need some air. I walked out into the night, shaking. I found a bench near the restaurant entrance and sat down hard, the air cold and too thin. I wrapped my arms around myself and tried to breathe. The guilt came first. Hot and thick. I'd embarrassed him. Said too much. I didn't mean to unravel like that. Then the shame followed. Not because of Jordan. But because part of me had felt something when I was with him, something I hadn't felt in years. A quiet aliveness. Not attraction, maybe, but connection. And I hated myself for it. How had I let it get this far? Inside, I saw Tom still at the table, staring into his drink. I closed my eyes, stomach churning. What am I doing? Who am I becoming? The house had grown quiet. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that buzzes beneath your skin. The kind that makes every footstep echo too loudly. It had been 2 weeks since the dinner. Tom and I hadn't fought since then, because we hadn't spoken, not really. We passed each other like strangers with shared keys. We discussed groceries. The thermostat. Jordan's new part-time job at the community center. But nothing real. No more date night attempts. No more back rubs or hopeful glances. The silence between us had hardened, like old paint that cracked when touched. I missed him. That was the truth I kept avoiding. Not just the way he used to kiss me when I left, or the way he'd pull me into his chest and make the world feel smaller. I missed his steadiness. His ridiculous optimism. His bad jokes. The way he used to hum in the shower, or whisper "You're still beautiful" when he thought I was asleep. But I didn't know how to find him again. Or if he wanted to be found. One night, I stood in the hallway outside our bedroom, watching him through the half-open door. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, head in his hands, elbows resting on his knees. He looked older. Tired in a way I hadn't noticed before. Like something inside him had given up trying. I hadn't thought much about his pain. I'd been so wrapped up in my guilt, my confusion, that I forgot he had his own ache too. The kind that comes when someone you love stops reaching back. He looked up and noticed me. Our eyes met for a second too long. "You okay?" I asked, quietly. He nodded, slow. "Yeah. Just thinking." "What about?" He paused. Everything I didn't say soon enough. I stood there frozen. Because that answer? That was the most honest thing he'd said in months. I wanted to go to him. I wanted to wrap my arms around him and cry into his shoulder and tell him I didn't know how we got here, but that I missed him. That I still loved him. But instead, I just nodded. "Me too." He gave a small, bitter smile. "Too late?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how. That night I slept on the couch. Not out of spite. Out of confusion. I stared at the ceiling, wondering how many moments we could have turned things around, if I'd spoken sooner, if he'd listened harder, if I hadn't been so consumed with what I wasn't getting, and he hadn't been so blind to what I was holding in. And then there was Jordan. I hadn't seen much of him lately. Whether by instinct or discomfort, he'd kept his distance since that morning at the gym. I was relieved. And sad. And everything in between. The next morning, I watched Tom make his coffee without humming. He used to hum every morning. That broke me a little. "I'm going to the hardware store," he said. "Okay." He looked at me. Not cold. Just defeated. "Want to come?" The question was so small. So simple. But it landed hard. I hesitated. "Yeah," I said softly. "I'd like that." He gave a short nod, then walked toward the door. I followed him quietly, the distance between us still wide, but not impossible. As we got in the car, I rested my hand on the center console. I didn't grab his. Just left it there. Open. For now. I didn't know what trying again looked like. I didn't know if love could rebuild after so much silence. But I knew one thing, I wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. It happened quietly. We didn't explode. There were no slammed doors or harsh words. Just a slow unfolding. A resignation, almost. We sat on the back porch one evening, Tom with a beer in his hand, me with tea that had long gone cold. The cicadas buzzed in the trees, the kind of late summer hum that fills silence without fixing it. He finally spoke. "I don't think we know how to talk to each other anymore." I nodded. "I've been feeling that too." He glanced over at me, his face unreadable. "And I keep thinking, maybe we're both holding on to the memory of us. Not what we are now." That hurt. Because it was true. I blinked back the sting in my eyes. When did we stop trying? I think we never stopped. We just didn't know how to try in the right ways. He wasn't blaming. Just stating. Gently. I wanted to fix it with touch, he added. But you needed me to see you first. I looked down at my hands. And I needed to feel, more than needed. I wanted to feel chosen. I didn't even realize how lonely I was until someone else noticed. He didn't flinch at that, but I saw something in his jaw tighten. Pain. Maybe acceptance. I don't hate you, he said. I know. I still love you. I met his eyes. I love you too. The wind picked up slightly, brushing through the trees, stirring the leaves. We both watched it for a while like it might carry away the ache between us. Then he reached out and placed his hand gently over mine. Warm. Familiar. I don't know what's next, he said. Me neither. The porch light flickered on automatically. We sat there a little longer, saying nothing, holding hands like we were remembering how to be tender. That night, he fell asleep on the couch. Not because we were angry, but because neither of us reached for the other when the lights went out. And in the morning, when I walked past him still sleeping, I stopped. Stood there for a long time just watching him. He looked peaceful. Worn down in the quiet way men get when their hearts are tired. I leaned down and kissed his forehead. Just once. A goodbye wrapped in an apology I didn't know how to say aloud. Then I left the room. Neither of us said it was over. But sometimes, love ends not with a bang, but with a soft release. We both let go, just enough to feel the difference. You know, I used to think relationships ended because someone cheated, or screamed, or slammed a door. I thought endings were dramatic, final. But now I know, sometimes it ends quietly. Like a light left on in a room you never go back to. My name is Elaine. I'm 41. And I've learned that you can love someone deeply and still feel utterly alone beside them. You can sleep in the same bed, share the same meals, laugh at the same jokes, and still lose the thread that once held you together. Tom didn't stop loving me. That's what makes it hurt more. He just stopped seeing me. And maybe I stopped letting myself be seen. It's hard to admit that. It's easier to blame someone else, to count all the ways they failed to understand you. But intimacy isn't about being perfect, it's about being honest. And somewhere along the way, I stopped being honest, with him and with myself. I spent so long trying to want what I used to want. To pretend every kiss still meant something, that every touch didn't make me flinch inside. I told myself that if I just played the part right, the feelings would return. That maybe love was just something you reheat until it's warm again. But love doesn't work like that. It needs oxygen. Attention. Curiosity. Not just proximity. And then there was Jordan. It didn't go anywhere, at least, not the way some might assume. But that moment, that quiet, accidental connection when he looked at me like I was someone worth noticing, it shook something loose in me. It wasn't about lust. It was about presence. I hadn't realized how starved I was for someone to actually see me. To ask how I was, and wait for the answer. It wasn't about Jordan, not really. It was about what he reflected back, a version of myself I hadn't felt in years. Alive. Interesting. Human. I felt shame for that. Still do, some days. Because I loved Tom. Because I still do. But love isn't always enough to keep two people from drifting apart. Sometimes love isn't loud or passionate or angry, it's tired. It's quiet. It's forgotten somewhere between the dishes and the long workdays and the aching silence in bed. I used to crave touch. Then I began to fear it. Not because I didn't want it, but because I didn't want what came after. The assumption. The expectation. The performance. Why does everything have to turn into sex? That question haunted me. But the real question underneath was, why am I not enough as I am? I think a lot of women carry that. The guilt of not wanting. The shame of changing. The fear that saying no makes you unlovable, or broken, or cold. But I'm not cold. I just needed something else. I needed to be held without being asked for more. I needed a conversation that didn't end in a bedroom. I needed space to grieve the version of me that used to crave without hesitation. Tom and I didn't have a big ending. There was no betrayal. No fireworks. Just a shared understanding that something precious had been lost along the way, and neither of us knew how to find it again. We still talk sometimes. It's civil. Even kind. But distant. Like two people who once shared a dream and now wake up in different houses. And me? I'm still learning. I've started taking walks in the evening. I listen to music I used to love before everything got so quiet. I cook for myself, not for anyone else, and I eat slowly, at the table, not standing by the sink. I've started writing again. Just little things. Thoughts. Truths I was too afraid to say out loud before. I don't know if I'll fall in love again. Maybe. Maybe not. But I do know this, emotional intimacy is everything. Without it, touch is just friction. Without it, love is just a habit. A place you live long after the furniture has been moved out. And I refuse to live there anymore.